So, we're going to have to improvise because I believe I sold my 9-tooth, or it's not me sold or gave it to somebody at the Fray, my 9-tooth press. So, we are going to improvise by putting a 9-tooth on a completely different way than most people would think. Seen this done before. I stuck the shaft through a little more to make sure I'm not going to lean on the gear there after figuring out what was going on, but you can. This is very strange, I know. So there's an important note here. The spacing here for the WizzJet is a little tight for a pinion. You have to make sure that these pinions are 50 thou or so. If they're any bigger than that, they could rub the chassis. So in order to do that, you're allowed to sand them a little bit. So it's not hard to sand a pinion a couple thou. This is kind of difficult at times, especially the way I'm trying to do it. Because if I had the anvil, I would just be able to pop it in and do it. And I think somebody needed an anvil, and I just handed it to him at the Fray. So, in a pinch, we'll make it work. So I'm actually putting the 9-tooth on upside down. Because what I've done is I've put my anvil in for my 24-tooth gear that doesn't have the hole in it. It's kind of tricky because everything tends to float a little bit, so we're going to do our best to get this on right. Same thing when you put a 9-tooth on, spin the gear, spin the gear, spin the gear. The way I'm doing it right here just probably doesn't matter as much, but this is possible to do. I don't really recommend this. So now, I put it on a little too tight. So as you can see, there's just a little nub there. I could recommend taking that nub all the way off and just not use it, because it's just added weight, even on the top. It's very minimal added weight, but it is added weight. At the level we race these cars at, every little bit counts. Trust me, I've seen and heard things, and it's just the way it is. But you want this shaft here to just barely move up and down, just barely. I mean, that's moving probably about 2 thou, and I would probably tighten it up just a hair. And it's not hard to do. We can even push it through the top a little more. Probably be a little bit safer. Now this should spin. See, it's got to spin like this. If it doesn't spin like this, then we have problems. And I've got this so it has hardly any movement at all. I should have oiled it before I put the shaft in there. That was probably just a oversight miss. I would get some oil inside that hole. So I'm going to over oil it here, and hopefully it'll seep down in. And that was just because I forgot to. So now the next step for me, I'm not the most organized person, just FYI. So if you see stuff that doesn't look like I do things in a good order, you can ask my teammates. It's just the way I am, and I've tried and tried and tried to be more organized, and it's just really hard for me. When you put this back together, you want to make sure that this free spins the same amount. If you feel any drag there, then that's a problem. Okay. It is really hard to feel that. I'm going to make sure this is still ringed out. And a lot of times it's easier to put the idler in to test this, because you can try to make it move. So it feels okay. I can't say that feels perfect. I'm actually going to put a glass on it and see if it's rubbing in here at all. So the gear seems to have just a tiny, tiny little bit of friction there. And it's really close, but it does have a tiny, tiny little bit of friction there. So we need to get that figured out. That's going to be the next thing, because you don't want anytime there's friction, it's bad. I mean, it almost free spins completely, but it just doesn't quite. So when something like that happens, it turns out that reamer I used was not my 068, it was a 066. I don't know where my 068 is. I'm just going to open this up just for a quick example. This is my dull knife, so open it up just a little bit. That feels pretty good. I need to open up the top because the shaft isn't protruding the whole way through. I mean, that's the other thing we could do. We could just push that shaft up through and just get rid of this entire problem. So the easiest way I'm going to do that is I'm going to pull this pinion back down to flush. Right there. You can have a tiny little bit sticking out. Chamfer maybe. Now we'll stick it back in our RT tool. We'll press the gear on the rest of the way. Well, or we won't, because I need to use the other one, because it depends on which gear is tighter, whether it's the pinion or the 24 tooth. Typically the 24 tooth, after you've moved the pinion once like I already did, that's the way it's going to happen. So we are going to use the one with just a little nub. And these are common things that happen when we're building a TJet. I apologize for the camera work in case you're probably missing things. I'm trying to do the best that I can. Out. Yes, the one steel tool snaps the magnets. Now you can also just put a flat piece of stock in. I've done this as well. Just use flat tweezers just to make sure that I'm pushing the shaft and not the actual pinion. If you get the gear to go on straight the first time, typically when you press it on further, it stays straight. I should probably be rotating it and doing it the proper way, but I'm just trying to get this done. So, we now have all the shaft up at the top. You can cut that off as it spins. You can spin it, and just Dremel it off real quick. That's nice and free floaty. You can just plan that ahead of time, put your 9-tooth on flush. There's just different ways you can do things. And that's the way you want this to float. You'll be able to kick the motor and have it spin a little bit after you're done. And we're going to put the brushes back in the chassis. I'm trying to put this back in. We're going to listen to it real quick. Amp draw on my amp meter reads 10. Got a nice coast to it. Got too long of a guide pin, so it's kind of interesting. to hold it down on there because I didn't trim it yet. Where did my clip go? There's my clip. So, a lot of guys will tighten this little bit of lash up. This is, if you try and tighten that post up a little bit, you can do it. The RT tool works. You should, what I've learned is to push it forward as far as you can with the RT tool. So push the top plate forward as far as you can and look and see where it's coming down at. The feet are slightly different than when in Aurora sinks, and it always tends to go to the back. I've seen some guys actually manipulate one of these and cut the feet a little bit on the aluminum a little bit, so this will just naturally be a little bit forward. And I don't know if RT is working on a solution or a different base possibly for us. I don't know. I know somebody had asked him about it already. So you just peen that just a little bit. You don't want to go overboard. This material is soft, so if you go overboard, you're going to have a heck of a time getting that gear back off. But I mean, there's just you have to have a little float, or else nothing will move. So there we have that. And a lot of times you have just a ticking noise. That's where it comes from. As far as nice and quiet. Clip on it. We're still breaking in a little bit.